I want to welcome everybody who's here. These innovation forums have become very powerful ways to share and to get inside of the mind of leading thinkers, and today's no exception. And so, in a moment, I'll have Norman introduce our speaker. We had a great event yesterday at Ergo, and CAMPS is doing things that support manufacturers getting together, learning best practices, like this innovation forum, learning what's on the leading edge. And we have some other programs that you see here on the screen, like our CAMPS Health Trust is helping manufacturers save a lot of money and get better access to health benefits for their employees. So it's something to check into. You can get a free quote by going to our website, and there's no obligation, but just a chance to double check the prices. Our accelerator program is expanding. We're meeting in 7 different cities throughout the state of Washington, and we're meeting with manufacturers. But that's an opportunity for you to connect with other manufacturers and to get access to resources. So I encourage you after this meeting to check out the accelerator program on our website. Build at WA is another, and I think a fantastic program that supports manufacturing by putting your jobs in front of job seekers. We have between 1,500 and 2,000 job seekers every month go to our Build at WA website and look for your jobs. So I encourage you to go to our website and to check that out, and it's absolutely free to CAMPS members. It's an opportunity to put your job in front of job seekers. We advertise your jobs out into the community. So I advise you to look into that and take advantage of these programs. And with that, I'll just thank Norman for being such a great leader of our innovation forum. Norman, I'll turn the time over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kirk. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to our May Innovation Forum meeting. We are very excited today to be joined by Ben Marsh, who is the CEO of Scout Systems, and very much looking forward to a rich discussion around data and API and web. And if you're wondering to yourself, what exactly is a web, you're at the right place. So without any further ado, I'm just going to hand it over to Ben and just be amazed at all the exciting stuff that Scout Systems is working on.
All right, thank you. All right, everybody. Good seeing some of you. Let's see, I'm going to get this set up real quick. All right, so today, what I really wanted to do was, this was inspired by conversations I've had with customers of Scout and even manufacturers that are quite advanced. This topic is something that I feel, again, even the more advanced manufacturers are not very adequately approaching this type of technology and what to do. And I realized that this can be just because it originally has been an overwhelming concept. I remember when I started Scout, I didn't fully understand what APIs and webhooks were. And back in college, even though now I run a software company, I did get a D in software classes. It was difficult for me to conceptualize what is a float, what is a long, why would you care, and why aren't all things strings or integers, and those kind of elements. Once you go into the real world and you start to utilize data and you see how it can function and do things, it was like an aha moment, and it really clicked, and it made everything make so much more sense. So today, what I wanted to do was to do a presentation that's less for the coders and more for just business leaders. So that way you can understand what data you should be collecting and how can you utilize this in a seriously simplistic fashion that is going to open up new opportunities. So today, let's see, make sure I got this clicking. Today, I'm going to be avoiding all of the traditional buzzwords. You're not going to hear me talking about standard deviation and any type of mathematician elements. It's going to be focusing on tangible examples, things that you should be able to relate to. These are not just going to be complex abstract theories. I'm going to be talking about really simple tools that are available to you today that you can get either for free or really cheap that you could be able to implement. Again, not super complex, flashy tech, and how to use this simplistic form of data to create applications, not how to just collect data. I want to really focus in on, imagine having nothing, and let's start from scratch, and let's start to figure out a way to quickly achieve a return on your investment of the energies that you invest. So I wanted to begin by taking the simplest form of data. And the way that I try to visualize this is stuff that you would have in meetings, text messages, just those kind of elements. So ideas that I was thinking about for this is to find out, what is the job status? If you have a change in your priority for the day, how do you pass that information along? If something goes down with your equipment or machinery, how do you figure out who's going to get on this, who's going to put in the request, and how they're going to fix it? And again, when a line goes down, What do you do? What are the modes of operations to then resolve that issue? So then going beyond that, what a lot of times when I find manufacturers, people focus on what is the cost of this new technology? And that's a very fair question. But the other element is to understand is what is the cost of the analog technology? Because emails, text messages, walking down the floor is, in a sense, it's a form of work that you're paying for every single day. So things like reading and writing emails, how much time do you spend doing that? How often do you have to interrupt an operator to find out information that they might possess? How often do your operators have to leave a production cell to go find support, find materials, find just direction? The operators that have to fill out paperwork, the work orders, the quality checks, and then updating the jobs in an ERP, having to go through team meetings and huddles, and also the manual data entry. Now, all of this stuff usually leads to some type of value proposition, but there is a cost to it. Same thing like cost of quality. There is a cost to creating high quality, and you want to find that threshold of what is of value enough and what is the appropriate return. But now when we take in consideration all of this work, what I wanted to do was just envision how often does this take place in your factory? Oh, about a decade ago when I was a manufacturing engineer, I remember sitting with the production supervisors, and one of them told me that they were estimating around 160 emails a day from internal meetings or information exchanges that took place. And so to sit there and have to read and write 160 responses in an 8-hour day, to me, it looks like there's an opportunity to pursue what we do with lean, where we start to figure out ways that we trim wasted energy. So when we focus on lean manufacturing, we focus so much on the production floor, but those same types of concepts can very easily be converted into administrative work. Now, when you start to worry or work towards the administrative work, you're going to be freeing up more labor, more resources, where you could put better support to your production floor. So there is a direct benefit to improving your administrative communications to what you can yield out of your capacity. So we all know the main principles of lean, but there's elements to this where when you're talking about data exchange, I think it's really important to take a look at the principles of lean and to see what are you doing that is very much not lean, like non-utilized talent. Or what if you take skilled labor and you make them do things like writing emails and filling out paperwork and stuff that's taking them away from the skill set that you hired them for? Extra processing, inventory, papers that are just stockpiling of all the data entry that you have to do. These are very similar things that this is just waste that your organization is paying for on a daily basis that may or may not ever have any value. So if you take your 8-hour day, how much of that 8-hour day is waste due to administrative data exchanges? So now when it comes to data exchange, this is where we're going to slowly start to enter some of the technical world, but I'm going to keep it really straightforward. You have two elements in the data industry, which is vital to everything. You have the application programming interface, which is an API, and then you have what are called webhooks. These two elements are paramount in order to create any form of automation inside of a factory. And so to better sense what these things are, APIs are like a waiter, and a webhook is like a doorbell. So a waiter is your access point to a kitchen. You go into a restaurant and you put in an order. That's what we would call a post, pushing information in, and you're pushing into the waiter, I would like you to put this order into the kitchen so that way they make my element. So you post that order, it goes to the kitchen makes the food, and when it returns, that would be a call or a get, where you're saying, I would like to now get that hamburger that I put that request in. So that simple exchange. Then the other element is the webhook. This is the doorbell. When I hear the doorbell ring, I want somebody to open the door. That tells me that there's an action, there's an event taking place. Somebody is at my front door. I have heard the notification. Therefore, the next action is to open the door to receive my guest or to receive the package that I've ordered. So the same concept works when it comes to programming. So some very simple elements of automation. Left column, your APIs, things you want. Right column, your webhooks, when you want them. I would like to know when a work order has finished. When would you like to know this? As soon as a job completes. I would like to automatically notify my maintenance department that there's an issue. When? As soon as I see a fault code. I would like to update a production cell of their daily schedule. When? As soon as we see there's a change in our production schedule. These things are emails, text messages, walking to the floor that probably take place in your organization, but these are all instances where automation is stupendously simple to implement, and it doesn't require extensive amounts of data collection. So now, to visualize what this stuff looks like, So if you don't have any background in coding and you're interested in trying to roll this out, what in the world does this stuff look like? So your backend system, this would be your ERP, your QM, if you have an MES, any software system that you have that has a database. Ultimately, this is what we're talking about. Now, if you have these systems in place, you should be able to find out very quickly if there's an API portal. You can either ask them, or if you go to the website, there's usually like a developer portal, an API portal, something of that nature. In Scout, this is an example of our API dev portal. So in the middle section, where I have highlighted in green, this is a maintenance request. So in here, it is a GET, which means I would like to get information. So if the operators submit a maintenance request, the system can process it and it has the data set available. And it's a GET allowing people to get that information from our system. The actual exchange is only a URL. It might be hard to see on the screen, but the request over here is purely a URL post. And when a software system visits this URL post, it exports a JSON string, which is just the characters of data. You visit a website and you as a person read this content, but when a software visits an API website, it's just clean data. And that's all we're talking about. So the same way you go to a news site to get your updates on information, software systems, they go to an internal website or an API portal to just receive just crude data, and then they process it from there. So it's really straightforward from the software side. And then the webhook is the same thing. When you have your local, you create basically your own local URL of saying, hey, if that doorbell is pushed, I want it to come here to this URL. And that's what we're going to be paying attention to. So as soon as that triggered event takes place, my integrator is acknowledging that happened, and we now know to pursue logic. So to visualize this a little bit bigger from the holistic point, the left side of the screen, we've got our backend systems, your ERP. The right-hand side is that whole entire world basically of IoT. So when people like myself or other technology people are selling you on the world of IoT and automation and Industry 4.0, what you could benefit from, we're talking about that far right column. These are all digital elements of your factory. And in the middle is the only part that you have to build. This is what you would call either an API integrator or an API management system. So basically from here, you have your database on the left-hand side of the screen, and on the right-hand side of the screen, you have all these events that could take place. What you just need to do is in the middle of when this event takes place, I would like this action to happen. Or if this event takes place, I'd like to pull from this one and move it here. The vendors like myself, we don't necessarily know what type of exchanges of data are useful to your organization. So the API integrator in the middle, this is the only part where you have to start to get creative and look for opportunities. Now, to build one of these things, even if you don't, again, have no coding experience, it is relatively very easy to do. So on the left side and the right side, these are two systems that I like to personally use for testing. Google Sheets, it has AppScript where you could write, or you could have plugins that you could put it directly into a Google Sheet, and you could do API calls and testing directly from there, and that should be free of charge. ChatGPT, I use ChatGPT a lot, and I have an example I'll show you soon. You could go to ChatGPT and you could tell it what you're trying to do, and it will write the code for you. Postman, again, so you can go in the red circle, blue circle, but these should be tools that are going to get you equipped so you could begin to experiment. Postman is, I think it's a paid version, but it's not very expensive, has a little bit more tools and a testing environment. So if you're a bit more experienced, or if you want to go to a more professional grade, I would go to Postman, but Google Sheets, fantastic place to do some experimentation. So now using ChatGPT, this is a video. I'm going to hit pause real quick. This was an experiment that I was building for a software program for my own home. My wife and I have some allergy and food restrictions. And so I was building an AI system that will do our meal planning. And out of curiosity, I was exploring the opportunity to automatically send my grocery cart to Kroger so I could pre-populate all my orders based on the meal plan. So I signed up with their dev portal. And in this video, you're going to see me put two sentences. So I want to make sure this is seen here. Is where I've highlighted, I'm basically saying use this API information. This was their API documentation. That's all I said. Use that, and I want you to list the 10 nearest locations to me in a Google Sheet in cell A. That's what I ask it to do. And I upload the documentation. As you can see in live time, this is a 1-to-1 playback speed. It comes up with a plan. It gives me a structure of what I should do, how to access the app script to implement this code. And then it begins to write the code directly for me. And inside the code, it will leave comments of saying, you need to put your API key here. You need to make sure that this is set up correctly. So it can guide you through writing this code. Now, going forward into understanding a little bit slightly more advanced example of how you could use this type of automation, not just those basic triggers. Imagine getting a webhook that a workstation has completed an order. Just any station has now finished a job. The first thing that you do then is you put a get. You say, I would like to get information about whatever order just finished from that station that we know. So now you then get that information back. So now you want to take that information, you now want to push it into your ERP. So I found out that cell 1 has finished work order A, 10 units. So I immediately turn around and I post it to my ERP that cell 1 finished 10 of said units. So now we can automatically close out that job in your Kanban. Now the next thing, let's take it to a newer level to compare it. So you say, okay, now that I know that this work order finished, and let's assume that the cycle time is 3 minutes per, I would like to get a historical record of how long we have traditionally built this unit. So now, as you find out that historically you build it in, let's say, 4 minutes, and this last order you did it in 3 minutes, your integrator can then compare what was our realized time versus our historical time. And if you find a discrepancy, let's say it is somehow the operators built it 20% faster than you've ever built it before. Maybe they forgot something critical. Maybe there was a transition or different operator stood in, filled out or finished the job, and they missed something that was critical. This is an example of how you could build an integrator that could flag your quality department in live time and go, hey, this is a questionable work order. Can somebody from quality come and verify that everything's done on this one? Because there's suspicion that we may have sent out an incomplete product. Or maybe you notify your manufacturing engineering department. Maybe you have a skilled laborer that has discovered a different form of process that you would like to document, and that turned that into your new tribal knowledge standard operating procedures. So now the benefit of moving towards the digital factory, and this is where you'll see probably a lot of people in my industry and others, where we promote this digital twin and this digital factory. A lot of times when I talk to people, the conceptualization of what exactly does it mean to have a digital factory falls on deaf ears. And the reason I want to bring this part around is when you have a digital factory, then all of your assets on the production floor are tapped in through whatever form of technology. You're ultimately creating all of these opportunities to have API or webhook events. So if you were envisioning in your analog factory, when a maintenance request or a machine goes down, I would want to know instantaneously. This is one of those examples. If you have that system digitized, or you have a digital twin and cloned of all of your assets, you now can begin to create that world of automation. Now, in my specific world, I'm all about work instructions, as you probably know, if you know anything about me. Comparing analog versus digital work instructions, a lot of people get hung up on the very, very first point here of operator guidance. My veterans have been building the same product for 20 years. Why do they need work instructions? They get hung up on that element, but they neglect to recognize the benefits that come with this. Revision control. Every time you make a change, you have to go out and print and destroy and update your things. If you have multiple languages on the floor, that means you just have more documentation to record in different languages. No data collection, no messaging opportunities. There's no quality checkpoints. There's no tool integration, and there's none of these API webhook events. When you move to a digital world, you get all of those and then some. And I'm just going to put this over on the side. We do provide our software or designer for free. So if you have not signed up for it yet, I'll leave this on the screen for a bit, and you could easily take your phone, scan that QR code, and you could sign up and get access to our platform today. There's no cost, no catch. The only thing that we are trying to do here is that if you are using Word, PowerPoint, or Excel today, that would be, in my mind, equivalent of trying to pursue a career in photography, and you're putting all of your energy into learning how to use a Polaroid camera. It's not going to transition the way that you want. And if you're using Word, Excel, PowerPoint to build your documentation, I would advise you sign up for free today, because the day that you ever decide to migrate to a digitized system, you're going to have to rebuild all of those instructions over again. You could use our system today, print it out with paper, and you can continue to function in the analog world at no cost. But the day that you decide hey, digitalization makes sense for us. It's flipping a switch. You don't have to redo all that work. Now, when it comes to when you should do this and why you should do this, another QR code, you could download this for free as well. We created our project success mode in effects analysis tool. My background in manufacturing engineering, a PFMEA and a DFMEA, I find to be incredibly powerful tools when it comes to figuring out ways to improve a process or a design to make sure that there's no errors. What we did is during the COVID period is we focused on our installations and our training to look for opportunities. How do we better serve our clientele? And we took the negative elements of a PFMEA and we inverted it to be a positive. So this is the project success mode and effects analysis tool. And we do this with every single customer. And I would recommend everybody here listening to try this. It is not a sales tool. It's more of a roadmap goal. And the way that this works is you start by writing the pain points of an organization. And so examples in mine here is we're missing out on higher caliber contracts and we're struggling to find skilled labor. We're relying on overtime far too regularly. So this is a pain point of an organization. Then the next thing is to then list out your opportunities. So that's in this step 2. So come up with ideas. If we were able to reduce our production lead time by 10%, what would be the benefits of this? We would have improved on-time delivery. The effect or the benefit of said effect is you could avoid late penalties. You could win larger contracts. And then you start to put in, okay, so what would be the value of the benefit? Maybe you have 50,000 a year in late penalties that you take on. And then to the right of that is again, what would be a satisfaction? If you could reduce that cost or to achieve that gain, how close of it would it be a win? And then the last thing to do is to then put them into categories. And the reason why I like doing this is that as you start to list out opportunities in your organization and you start to put them into categories, whether it's improving your quality, decreasing your costs, increasing your capacity, or decreasing your training time, you're going to start to find a theme. And so as you start to put these things in place, it's going to make it really clear that you need to put focus on tribal knowledge, or you need to put a focus on quality improvements. And the benefit to this is it removes the bias of all the people that are in the meeting. If you bring in all of your company heads, the person from quality is probably going to have a bias to improving the quality of your organization. So by listing it out this way, it gives everybody the opportunity to really paint a picture of what should we be working to fix. Now, those satisfaction goals down at the bottom, it's a little calculator, and it basically is calculating if you achieve your goals of just as satisfaction, this is what the compounding benefits are. So you could start to see as a vision of a company, if we really target these solutions, the payoff could become this. This starts to give you a sense of how much money should you be investing into these areas. So if you're going to make $20,000 a year in return, you might not want to spend $100,000 on the technology because a 5-year ROI might not be worth it, might be too risky. But as you start moving down the road of change and you start to discover these wins, it's a good thing to have that kind of playbook in your hand because you could see that there is opportunities that are in front of you and that as you find success and change, it could fund the next development of it. Very good program that we use for everybody. And again, this works for any industry, any type of solution because it's not selling one type of solution. It just helps you organize and to create your roadmap. Now, going a little bit further and taking my previous examples, I want to step this up a hair and show you how you could even use technology further to paint a picture of what the future of manufacturing can be utilizing digitalization and AI. So in my previous example, we get a work order, webhook notification that a work order is finished. I now get the information just like before. So I now know that station 1 finished this work order. Now, this is from a Scout perspective. We call them step times. So instead of a cycle time of 5 minutes, we record every single individual work instruction time, and we call those steps. So if there's 10 steps to build a unit, each 10 steps has its own individual cycle time. So get that information from Scout, then ask for all historical, so you could start to see that these steps should take this much time. So very similar to our previous example where we're looking for a 20% anomaly, now we're zooming into every single sub action, again, doing similar. So now once you take all of this information, gather it all up, and then just give it to AI. So an example, you could post this to ChatGPT and you give it what's called a prompt. And so a prompt would be something of the nature of, hey, ChatGPT, pretend that you are a manufacturing engineer that's reviewing data on a production cell. Here's my historical individual step times. And here is the realized step times that we just got from the production cell. Do you see anything that looks questionable? And that could be all it is. I've done this with the AI systems and it's remarkably accurate. And then let AI process your data from a very micro scale. And if it sees any kind of anomalies, notify your quality or notify your manufacturing engineering department. These complex calls, you have to have an API key to work with a ChatGPT or an equivalent. And the cost, you're going to be sending them that data and they're going to process it on your account and then they'll kick it back. I do extensive testing and majority of the time, it costs me like 1 cent to process something. So I'm estimating on a high side here that if you were to take all of your production data and dump it into an AI model, when a unit finishes, I suspect it would cost you around 3 cents to have an AI system analyze your production data to get a sense of whether or not it was done correctly. And so if you move into this route and you're now automating the exchanges of data amongst your administration, you're then implementing in ways that you could have higher level of quality analysis being done without sensory devices, without interrupting your operators, without interrupting your quality department. You're only flagging your quality department when there's something that looks suspicious. But you're not talking about a work order that went down the line, entered a different work area, and somebody then flagged it from there and you stopped a line. So the benefits to this is that you'll be faster with your communication, latency of problems should shrink, and the cost to implement is remarkably cheap. To build out an integrator and to build these things is really going to come down to the complexity of what you're trying to accomplish. But I would always recommend create your roadmap in a way that you're targeting a return on your investment. Solve this one task, prove that it works, see the return on that, and go down the line and start chipping away at these. That way you're just having compound returns on this. And then your API integration tools, the cost of developing it, basically become neutralized because every time you take on a small project, you are paying for it, moving on. So the whole entire time, this type of technology should remain in the black or at least very close to it. And then as soon as you're done, you have now unlocked a whole new world of automation and communication that has not ever been previously achievable in manufacturing due to the analog restrictions. So with that, that's my presentation on this one, but I would love to answer any specific questions or examples or provide insight about those elements. I see a question from Dave.
Ben, I run an IT company, support a bunch of manufacturing clients. And so I'm fascinated when I get the opportunity to hear you guys talk about this kind of stuff. And I believe you and I have chatted a few times. I spend a tremendous amount of time interacting with AI right now, talking about it, thinking about it, investing in it. As you were going through this presentation, I was going, pardon me, when is he going to mention AI? And so we talk about posting data sets to AI, ChatGPT. Are you literally just grabbing a set of data and saying, please find anomalies? I was like, it's that simple.
It is that simple. So my prompting, I've had to make a couple different modifications to the way that I prompt, but I have given it massive data sets where just out of curiosity, just to explore how good it is at statistical analysis. And when I knew that there was weird things in the data sets, I've dumped it and just let it process it. And it's flagged very similar. There might be times where it asks me follow-up questions where it will say, okay, I noticed this is this, and it would ask me a question and I would give it a little bit more clarity. This is not, of course, a bulletproof guaranteed way, but this is just an example of how you can test with it. But I have found really good success in it. The only issue that I've ever seen is when there's human error opportunities where an operator might accidentally mess up a data set. But even if they were to do that, if quality was notified of a human error, that's fine. I'd rather get a false negative than miss a negative completely.
No, when you say all of that, for the last few months, I've been experimenting with Copilot for Microsoft 365. So that's a $360 first year investment. And it both is able to look at the greater body of data on the internet, but also your own data. And I am just absolutely fascinated by what it's able to do. And lately, I haven't been saying that I use AI. I've been saying that I collaborate with it. Like Copilot is now an employee of my company. And much like my employees will make false statements or people will lie, AI, they call it hallucinations. And I find you both have to ask the right question in the right way, which oftentimes is a more robust question but then you also have to think about what the results are and are they real and all that sort of stuff. So I imagine you've been practicing with that and developing a style around the right way to ask and what to believe and what not to believe from the results. So it's just another data point in the stream. Am I picking that up correctly?
Yes, you are very much. Yeah, there's definitely going to be elements that would vary when it comes to prompting. If you're trying to go to this high level of statistical analysis, I would suggest that this was definitely a tier 3, working your way down this implementation. And by the time that you get to this point, you should become, or you should at least be far more capable of processing this data manually. I wouldn't jump to AI unless you could do it yourself first, because when you know how to do it yourself and you know what you're looking for, these types of anomalies, these types of standard deviations, you could then start to train your AI model of saying, these are things that I personally look for. These are patterns of human error, and give that to your AI engine as much as you can. So that way it is trained. But we have, like at Scout, probably between 8 and 10 different models that we have thoroughly trained, from marketing to programming to analytics. And so it all really comes down to building that training model.
Ben, I don't want to make this all about me, but 40 years in IT, I spent quite a bit of time. I was a master at Crystal Reports and wrote a 500-line SQL query and things like that. And I was once the guy that people that wanted information came to and said, can you get this information for me? Now that I'm a CEO, I'm the guy looking for the information. And I've yet to ask AI a single question about one of my spreadsheets or pivot tables, or I'm sitting there going, wow, boy, I've found so many interesting, creative ways to have AI make me more powerful. But you've inspired me to go ask it some questions about some of the data I'm looking at right now, average revenue per client per month, things like that, or try to take your clients and organize them by markets. Because is this construction or manufacturing? Is sport manufacturing? And you've inspired me to go down that route. So,
well, I'm happy to hear that.
By the way, Ben, here's something I learned about AI. If you hit the Windows key on your keyboard and H, it brings up dictate. And I have learned that the more robust prompt you give AI, oftentimes better result. So I sit here and hit dictate and then blah, 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 because I can say so much more in words than I can type. Yeah, speaking to it. I feel like Captain Kirk talking to the ship computer. But anyway, thank you
Oh,
for
man,
that.
I'm happy to. I actively have 3 different AI tabs and tools open, I think, all day long, depending on what I'm trying to accomplish. But it is profoundly powerful. And if there's a takeaway, if anything, everybody should be exploring this. It is incredibly simple to do. The API tools that I built, like this personal program that I built just for my family, it's incredibly complex. And I wrote probably 5% of the code, and it did all of it. And so it makes life so much easier and faster. If you don't have an IT department, you can hire out your consultants. And if you want to try to take it in-house, I would just use an AI tool and explore. And I think it'd be a very easy test for people to implement.
Are you a Microsoft 365 user, Ben?
I'm not. I'm heavily in the Google programs.
Gotcha. I'm finding Copilot, when you actually pay for the Copilot Pro, the
Yeah.
way it integrates into the applications and looks into my own data, it's amazing and a little scary at times how it will go and find a document I wrote in 2018 and tell me how it's relevant to the query that I put in and stuff. So anyway, it's something, like I say, it's looking at the greater body of data and your own data and it collates them together in the responses. So I imagine Google has something similar.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Picking back up from where you left off, right? Very exciting times and a bit scary as well. Ben, I want to dive a bit more into that transition from analog to digital.
Okay.
So for us to recognize the need to move to that, that's where we're at today, and that's where we're going for sure. If you could give one key nugget of wisdom to those that are just embarking on that journey, from your experience working with manufacturers, from your own experience as a manufacturing engineer, what would you?
Good question. I think the most important thing that everybody should do is to really focus on making a digital roadmap. This is not a hard thing to do, but without having a roadmap, you don't have any path. You're going on a road trip with no destination. And what I think is important about a roadmap is it starts to paint a picture of the sequence of steps that need to be done. It could be overwhelming to think about dumping a lot of analog processes to convert to a digital one. So prioritizing those is key in making sure that you're focused on a path that is segmented enough that you will have a higher chance of success. You take on too much, highly likely that you're going to fail. So I think it's wise for organizations to sit down and to conceptualize, where do we want to be in 6 months, 12 months, and 24 months? That way you could start to at least pull out the workload and then paint a picture of, we're definitely not going to be here in 12 months unless these things are in place by 12, and these things need to be in place in 6 months in order for us to hit these 12-month goals. So the same way that you do a business plan, you should really sit down and do that. And it doesn't require technology. It just takes some time to sit down with other executives in your organization and really plan out, where should we be.
That's great. Maybe even ask AI to help develop that roadmap for you with some prompts.
Absolutely.
Speaking of prompts, and for those who've used AI and have experience with it, I'd love to get your tips and kind of tricks of the trade on how to really get to those robust prompts to get very rich answers back. Because
Okay.
hallucinations is a very real thing for sure. I've experienced that. And just having confidence in what you're getting back, obviously it starts with the information you're providing to the AI. So open that up to anybody just with tips and tricks of the trade or how to get those prompts.
I'll say one of my favorite things that I like to do is, and so like I use ChatGPT a lot for this, and I'll create multiple different panels on the side. And when I start my prompts, I'll either feed it information of something that I like. I find blogs that might have styles, or if I was doing SEO or marketing materials, I could find material online that I really want to abide by. And so then I send that to my AI modal and I explain, okay, I want you to research all of this and understand that this is the direction of my prompt. So that way it knows this is what I'm trying to do. These are the processes that I'm going to be working to implement. And then when I switch things over and then say, okay, now based off of that information and that styling of what my objectives are, this is what I need help doing. So that way there's a little of a prerequisite of educating it. And then once it understands that, it and I are on the same path. And then from there, I just have a conversation. And it's, if people aren't doing this, I would really treat it as if you have the smartest intern you've ever possibly met sitting next to you that you don't even have to be polite to. But sometimes it's hard not to say, oh, thank you, because it helps make my life so much easier. But have conversations. Don't be intimidated by it. Like, you could be dumb as a rock and it won't judge you. So let it know, I have no idea what that means, and it will break it down further. So I think it's important to have those conversations and to feed it as much as you can so it can just understand what you're going for. And the better you do from there, it's remarkably accurate.
I'll add to that, Norman, and I know you're very interested in AI, so you're down that path deeply as well. But one of my first early successes where I really felt like I was getting it was when I filled out the 50th birthday card for my wife. And I sat down, and I like to use ChatGPT on my phone because I can speak to it. And I start talking about my wife and where we live and what the weather is and the card and the color of the card and the words on the card and what the milestones are. I just say everything that's on the top of my mind related to this, and say, will you write a note for me to write in my wife's birthday card? And then it comes back and it's this big long thing. And I said, that's really great. I like it. But would you remove that paragraph and add this and change that? And it took a good 5 minutes of talking back and forth with it to get it to hone it up to something that was close to what I wanted. And then what I ended up writing in the card was a little different still. And as Ben touched on, and I touched on earlier, I've stopped talking about AI, whether it's Copilot or ChatGPT or Gemini. I've stopped talking about it being a tool. And I've started talking about it being a coworker, a comrade, a collaborator, right? And then you're having a conversation, you're batting around ideas, I shouldn't say this out loud, but sometimes I feel like I've had successful relationships with autistic people. And oftentimes you have this encyclopedic knowledge of things, but they don't necessarily have the tools to take that, and they need a partner oftentimes to be successful. And you're partnering with this thing that has this deep body of knowledge that it's able to park up. Furthermore, one of the things that I have learned that the AI, that the current models, the natural language models is they are able to synthesize empathy in a way that I'm not at all capable of. I struggle sometimes saying stupid things to people, but its ability to be thoughtful. In Copilot, you can literally draft with Copilot in an email and tell it to be more professional, less professional. You can use coaching and it'll come back and say, the way you phrase that might offend people and things like that. So I think the number one way to use it today is to write more, faster, better. Content, emails, communications, that's where it's super powerful today. And I'm using it all day long. I use draft with Copilot on probably 50-60% of my emails, because I can bang out a couple sentences and then it literally reads my email, it goes into my data, it comes back, and Norman, I bet you I could write an email to you and it would go find some interaction that you and I have had and pull from that to add context. It's amazing, but it is that, treat it like a friend.
Super
Yep.
powerful. And it's a bit of a mindset shift, right? From a tool to an employee almost, or Ben, as you mentioned, the world's smartest intern.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. And I do use please and thank you when I talk to AI, just in case, cover my bases, right? In case, but fascinating. I know we can
when
just
it
talk
comes
for
to your
hours.
life, it'll be more empathetic towards you.
That's right. So I want to plug these guys, no benefit to my own, but if you visit scout.systems, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a chat bot, and it's an AI one, and the company it's Chat Simple. And if any of you are interested in boosting your marketing on your website, I can't emphasize that program enough. And what it does is you give it materials. So we have our Scout Academy, and I've given it all of the blogs of our academy. The bot has mastered our abilities of our system due to consuming the academy. And then we have 3 different bots that we use, and they have different tones. So if you're going to like the training section and you're asking our bot for assistance, it pulls from the academy, and you could say questions like, I'm struggling to figure out where do I add a user? And it will respond to you. This is where you go, then this. And then if you have really technical questions or problems, you could program it to understand that these are escalation questions. So if somebody starts bringing up some elements about struggling to visualize how they could do this with their factory, the bot then knows to then say, hey, here's Ben's calendar link. Maybe you should send him a message and you could talk to a person about this. But I get notifications about the conversations that take place on our website, and I get to then retrain it if I see something that it says that I wouldn't like. But I'm to a point now that when I read these messages, they are better than any sales rep I could have fathomed training, because as I'm reading, I'm like, that's exactly what I would have said. And so here I have this AI bot 24/7 that's converting to any language of any person around the world that's messaging to this bot. And it talks as if it's me. And it just makes my life wonderful, because by the time that those escalations have taken place, they've gone through the full warm-up channel. And now they're ready to talk to me, and it's amazing.
And we've gone from talking about your topic to AI. I'm super fascinated with it, and it's amazing stuff. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I said before, being an IT guy that supports manufacturers, it's fun to come and see what manufacturers are thinking about. But I think something similar to what you're doing and what I'm doing in IT is just how important metrics and measurement is, right? There's that saying, if you measure it and manage to it, it will improve. And that getting in there, what's happening on a workstation is a leading indicator. Every business is judged on profit, right? EBITDA, the goal is profit. But ultimately, you can't lead to better profit and consistent profit if you aren't getting closer and closer to the beginning and measuring things as they're coming down. It's good stuff. It's worth pursuing.
I've said this for years, and I don't think people really, or at least historically, I don't think it's resonated, where when I explain how when you move towards a digital factory, you open up these opportunities of new automation. And I said that in this presentation, and I say it all the time. And I think people get hung up on physical automation of a robot doing something or a tool that assists the operators. And I think it's super important that when people take a step back and they recognize the waste that goes beyond the physical world, and imagine going to a factory 30, 40 years ago before they've even considered implementing lean. And then with everything that we know today, the opportunities that they would have, cutting out the waste and how much more efficient you would function. It's the exact same thing. The majority of factories are pre-lean when it comes to automation of data exchanges. and your factory is a complete mess. You've done nothing to really clean this thing up. And now as you move into this digital world, you're just going to start trimming out meetings. You're going to be trimming out contacts. You're going to be trimming out the emails exchanges. You're going to have really clean dashboards and notifications. And as you do that, it's the same thing of taking a messed up cell, cleaning it up, organizing it, and 5S'ing it. But it's just like the sky's the limit now. And especially because you have limitations too to the physical world. You buy that robot can only function within that box. But when you go into a digital factory, AI keeps growing, and you now just tap into more and more opportunities where there's no more investments. It's just another digital portal that you can connect into. And so it's make that transition. And then when you're ready for it, just chip away at it.
Hey, Ben,
Yeah.
I have a quick question for you, and that is, I'm so glad you brought up this idea of automation, but I've been looking for and thinking about other applications of AI inside of manufacturing. So I think Scout Systems is a really good example of opportunity and possibility, but could you speak to opportunities for using AI? And I loved your example of analyzing data, but
Mhm.
what else have you come up with?
So another one that I've done is you got to be cautious with this because if you're a Department of Defense contractor, you got to be careful with some of the security elements. But when there's no concerns about the security of sending it to an LLM or an AI engine, is take your work instructions, take the written content that you have in your engineering prints. And it's wildly sophisticated. And then send it into AI and see like how would you clean this thing up? Because I've seen worlds where the engineers in engineering might be a little bit more technical, and you're bringing in this 18-year-old person and you're expecting them to be able to understand all these words and understand how to read from this and then translate it. Use AI just to clean it up. The same way you would do a prompt with an email where you say, here's the text of the description. How would you break this into 5 bullet points that we could really cleanly organize our content? Or if you're using like digital work instructions, you have the opportunity to use multilingual translations. Not all words translate as easily. We had a client that had wire stripper, and we found out that the word stripper, when converted into Vietnamese, was a very wrong version of the word stripper. And so things like that, where you might want to then send it into AI with a prompt of how do you rechange this text to be better multilingual support. So that way you could avoid words that might have those conflicts. But there's opportunities like that where you can give it content. If you want to get really creative when it comes to AI, is you could even send pictures of production cells. I've been exploring this recently where you could upload imagery and AI can start to process what it's looking at and it can give you suggestions. So I don't know if you have a spaghetti diagram, you may be able to even start to implement that and see if it could give you ideas. But I think the way Dave said, it's a great tool. Like it will make MEs be far more efficient in what you do because you could streamline your stats, you could streamline your content, you could streamline your analytics. But the sky is really the limit here.
Hey, Ben, would you speak a little more about what Scout Systems does? Because you've been very kind to be educational, but
Yeah.
tell us more about Scout Systems.
So I'll back up a few slides here. So where we are is we are mostly known as a work instruction software company. And so back to this. So we build the work instructions. I'll go ahead and keep this up in case somebody wants to grab it. And so my world from manufacturing engineer, I recognized the red X's and the problems of the industry 10 years ago plus, where I heard everywhere in every manufacturer I talked to, the challenges of skilled labor, the challenges of cycle times, the challenges of overtime, and all these issues with it. And I was seeing the writing on the wall where if you move to a digital environment of work instructions, we as engineers can then start to tap into a world that was not fathomable at the time. And I was envisioning a future where an operator would be working at a production cell and the tools can be communicating with them. The tables can lower and raise depending on what step they are. So it's very ergonomic. You have materials that's being fed in sequence at the right time to make your operators hyper efficient. And how do you do that if you don't know what the operator is doing? And that's where I was starting to realize that if you have work instructions that are digitized, you now create a world where all those sequential triggers are now present. And once you have that in place, we are bridging the divide between humans to be a digital element. And like Over the weekend, I was watching this video and it was about the military and they were calling them as soldiers as a sensor. And the Department of Defense have been doing this for decades where they've been looking for ways to implement a live feeding of data so that way they can get it to their headquarters and they can make logistical decisions. It's the same type of concept where you have, as an organization, you're investing in people, you're investing in your tools and all the programs that you have in place. But this section, the humans, such a vital core element of it, are disconnected. And they have naturally, we just don't have the ability to tap into a digital network. And so Scout, we are a work instruction system. It has a lot more capabilities, but at the core, that's what we stand strong on. And so when it comes to production data, you have 100% cycle time analysis, you get production reports, production dashboards, and all those great things. And then we also have an accelerator program. That's our flagship. And it's a 90-day blitz where for a flat rate of $5,000, we will do the PSMEA with you. We will analyze your factory and we will try to roll out our technology within 90 days in a way that you have either secured a return on your investment or you are very confident that it's coming soon. And with that, we offer a full refund on day 1, day 89. If you don't feel like it's working for you, we just give you your money back. So that way digitalization is a no risk. And by the time that you get to the 90 days, we have a 92% success rate. So our goal is to make it just a simple decision. The digital world is a future world. It's happening everywhere. And we just want to make sure that manufacturers are positioned and ready to embrace it. And at their point, we're there for them to help them flip the switch and then to help them paint that roadmap of their future.
Hey, Ben, and others may have questions, but I just have to
Sure.
mention that at the beginning, you talked about the cost of digital versus the cost of analog.
Yes.
And I thought that was brilliant, by the way, that analysis and how much waste there is in analog. Jensen Hung of NVIDIA recently in an interview mentioned that they've created a new chipset for data centers that is so fast and so effective that even if their competitors gave away their chipsets for free, it would be too expensive. And I feel what you've presented to us today, Ben, was really something that having it could be more cost effective than not having it.
It is. The part I hate being a sales rep is that people don't normally believe you when you say things. But the biggest thing, and I tell this to every single client that's on the fence, where I'm like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to solve. The first thing that I'm going to solve are production gaps. And in my mind, the production gap is as soon as a work order finishes, how long until the next unit is started? And that gap in between production orders. Once a job finishes, there's closing out the ERP, filling out the final paperwork, talking to your lead, getting your stuff ready, doing your setup, your transition, signing in, getting all that stuff started before you even begin to work. And majority of companies that we see will see like a 10 to 15 minute production. And when you have digitalization, the first thing that we ever find out is, hey, let's preload your production schedule. So that way, as soon as the operator finishes the job, they immediately know what they're supposed to work on. Second, we have live production. So it's a dashboard that displays what the schedule is going to be, and it predicts when the job's going to finish. So if I'm a production support staff, I could see on a display that in 15 minutes, this cell is going to be done. Their next order is this. I start moving the materials. So that way, when the work order finishes, not only is the operator ready to go, their materials are there. And so the setup and the transition is drastically reduced. And if you're losing 10 to 15 minutes in every single production order due to these exchanges, if we could shave that down to 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 12 minutes of savings, every single production order, like our system, it pays for itself, usually like in 24, 48 hours. And I just let people know, just get there. Once you do that, it's the simplest thing. And it's not even anything analytical. We're just going to help you reduce your latency between job to job. And once that's done, the system's won. Everything else is frosting on a cake, and that frosting gets bigger and bigger. So it's so easy to do.
I love these free tools that you offered today. So today was very valuable.
All right, Ben, thank you again for taking the time to meet with us. Fascinating things. How we started the meeting, I talked about a crystal ball. I'll be amazed to see what the next year, 10 years, 30 years looks like, right, in the digital age. So we'll make sure that we link your contact information and the Scout Systems website to this video for folks who have additional questions. But thank you again for taking the time. And for everyone else, look forward to seeing you at our next meeting, June 5th.